Okay, oh, it's coming in there. So this is the poem by Christina Rossetti called Twice. It's composed in 1864. Rossetti is 34. The point in her life where she has probably no longer thinking about falling in love, getting married. And I think we'll see that reflected in what goes on in this poem. Okay, so it's quite a long one, Twice. So, this is possibly going to be quite a long presentation. So we have 6 stanzas, and they are structured quite obviously into halves. The first half, the first 3 stanzas, are addressed to a beloved, a chap, and they are in the past tense, talking about something that happened one day. Then the last 3 are addressed to God, and they are mostly in the present tense. Get very much a sense of a speaking voice in this poem, particularly in the first half, which is quite dramatic, and Rossetti uses dashes to indicate speech, like the pauses in speech. There's also enjambement, which gives that sense of the speaking voice moving forward, maybe also how heartbroken she was. So in the stanza 3, she says, "I have not often smiled since then." Sort of very significant pause after smiled. It brings to prominence what effect this had on her, that heartbreak. The second half has more religious diction, and probably most significantly, the second person pronoun you in the first half is replaced with thou and thy, which is appropriate because the poem has changed from addressing a fellow human being to addressing God. And thee and thou are the words used in prayers and in church services, but weren't used really in Victorian life for ordinary conversation. Each of the stanzas is 8 lines long. The odd lines are longer than the even lines, so I would actually point out that the even lines are quite short, especially in the first 4 stanzas, and in fact, especially in the first 2 stanzas. Those little lines are quite dramatic. They don't have a very regular metre to them. Let me live or die is one of them. I sometimes want to only give them 2 stresses. But then again, let me live or die. I guess we have got 3, but it's like the first word has to have a stress on it. You should speak, not I. Then set it down. That one really doesn't have a regular beat going on, does it? So, yea, judge me now. Very dramatic. Perhaps it is the stress on the first syllable that has that effect. Whereas the last 3 stanzas, and particularly the last 2, become very regular. So this is a nice example of where you can say something about how form reflects the tone of it, the point of the poem. The more regularity, the more smooth the metre, the more similar the line lengths are, reflecting her changed mood, her peace and her satisfaction with God. So that final stanza runs very smooth, 6 syllables nearly every line, and 3 beats nice and clear. I take my heart in my hand. I shall not die, but live. And not just the 3 beats, it's iambic, isn't it? Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. Before thy face I stand, oh, I. So that one does have the beat on I, for thou callest such. All that I have I bring, all that I am I give. Smile thou and I shall sing, but shall not question much. So if you are really interested in metre, you might look at the ones where the stress does fall on the first word of the line. But otherwise, that one's very regular. But yeah, earlier on, the line lengths really do vary. And the very short ones are often the very dramatic ones. Then set it down is when he puts her heart down. She's offered it to him, he's taken it, but he puts it down. With a critical eye you scanned, then set it down. And when she talks to God, she says, yea, judge me now. It's very dramatic, isn't it? So I've said that all lines have 3 stresses. Some of them maybe only have 2, depending on how you're reading them, those short ones. Just read it out loud to see what you get. Rhyme scheme's more clear. We go A, B, A, C, D, B. Can't read my own writing. A, B, A, C, D, B, D, C. So every word has a paired rhyme somewhere, but the C, B and the C rhymes take longer to resolve. So that first B rhyme, love, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 lines before you get another rhyming with that. And so we stand, no, that was hand, sorry, where's my C, A, B, A, C, die, I. And what you can say about that is it introduces a note of suspense or disharmony in the middle of the stanza, which is then resolved in the final 4 lines of each stanza. In stanza 4, the first one where she's addressing God, the rhyme used throughout, A, B, A, C, A, B, A, C, makes for more complete sounding thoughts, not that suspense or disharmony. Therefore, it creates this dramatic turning point in the poem, the sense that things actually fit together now. Now she's turned to God. A large part of the poem's effect comes from the second half's echoing and reversal of words and phrases from the first half. So when we did this in class, there are some little tasks for you to think about here. There will be some answers as the PowerPoint goes on through. So if you want to do that, you have to pause this. The image of the heart, one of the key symbols for Rossetti in her poetry, the heart and what it means and what she uses it to symbolise. It's not that different from what we all use it for in everyday culture. It's the seat of human passion, love, but just feelings generally. Yeah, so not just romantic love, but feelings for friends, feelings for family, just happiness. All lives in your heart. The poem is written as if the heart is physically present in the action. The beloved rejects it like a piece of fruit, calls it unripe. She hands it to him. He does take it in his hand, looks at it and goes, not ready yet, and he puts it down. So this gives the poem a sort of visceral strength. Visceral meaning bodily, you feel it in your body. Especially when the heart is injured, that line. As you set it down, it broke, but I did not wince. So that broke is repeated from the end of one line onto the other, and it's got a hard sound in it, hasn't it, as well, broke. She also describes her heart as marred, which means to physically spoil or scar something. So this heart, we can see it and we can see how it was hurt and damaged. In the first half, we have natural imagery. We're describing the skylarks. This is what the beloved suggests to her. He says, wait till the skylarks pipe, that is sing, till the corn grows brown. Well, both these things happen in autumn, which may lead us to think he's suggesting she's too forward. Yes, these things must grow and develop, and she's spoken too soon, perhaps. Maybe he's suggesting she's too eager, or maybe he's suggesting she's too young. The speaker, therefore, once he said this to her, can no longer take pleasure in those things, the cornflowers. Oh yes, and now she can no longer take pleasure in cornflowers nor join in with the birds singing. And those are both things that happen in spring, which is, as we know, associated with love and courtship. The reference to cornflowers could also be a reference to the fact that in Victorian times they were known as bachelor's buttons. That is, they were a flower. A button was your buttonhole where you put a flower if you're a gentleman, but they were called bachelor's buttons. So perhaps the man who rejected her has remained a bachelor. And also the fact, so she doesn't care for the cornflowers because she doesn't care for bachelors, possibly, and she can't sing with the singing birds. And in spring, birds are singing to attract a mate. So it could be literally saying, you know, I'm not going to sing with those birds. I can't sing to attract a mate. Or just generally you sing when you're happy, and she's not happy and she can't sing. When we get into the second half, we have a much more dramatic, no less painful image. The image of the heart being refined in fire. Once again, it's quite painful, visceral. You can feel it. This is a religious image. Rossetti hasn't made this up. It comes from an Old Testament idea that God is like a refiner's fire. God will purify people and refine them like you refine gold. So if we find a rock that contains gold, it has to be refined. And so refining in a fire is a process in which impurities are burned away, leaving only the precious metal behind. It's a very good metaphor, yeah, for this religious idea of the bit that God wants and the bit that he doesn't want, and also how painful that is for the Christian to go through. So burn thou my dross away, or purge thou its dross, all the dross in her heart. That represents the sin and the worldly concerns, which may well involve being in love with a man who then rejected you. Yeah, that would be the dross in your heart. So this is clearly a painful process for the heart and therefore the person who has to undergo it. God's not doing it because he's mean. He's doing it to get out the best of you, but it's going to be painful because you've got to reject all that. That is dross. What do we learn about the chat involved here? In the first stanza, her passionate address to him is put in brackets, which suggests she couldn't actually say that to him. I took my heart in my hand, in brackets, oh my love, oh my love. She couldn't call him that out loud. The adjectives around him, he's described as being friendly. We took it with a friendly smile and with a critical eye. They're not love-alike words, and they could be a little bit patronising. Let me look. And then the verbs associated with him, he scans it and he judges it, her heart, therefore her feelings. They sound rational and scientific. Fits with Victorian masculine values. That's the sort of ideal the Victorians had of masculinity. Women were supposed to be emotional, men rational. He takes her heart, he looks at it, and then he puts it down. So we have a little bit of dramatic action described in the poem. The critical action of rejection is repeated when he sets it down. That's repeated. I'm trying to find. As you set it down, it broke. Yep. So you set it down and said, and that's what he says. But then we go back to her and how she's feeling about it. As you set it down, it broke. His voice is decisive, it's not unkind, and he ends with an imperative. Wait while the skylarks pipe till the corn grows brown. In the second half, we have more religious references. It's not religious imagery, but it's references that a Victorian reader, Rossetti, could expect her readers to pick up on. There's an echo of Psalm 51 when the speaker offers God her broken heart. And this psalm was read, I think, at evening prayer. So every Sunday nearly, if you're doing the Book of Common Prayer, you would say this line. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. So my broken heart is what she offers to him. Also, when she says, my hope was written on sand, that is a reference to a parable in the New Testament of a foolish man who built his house on the sand. I will not sing the nursery song now, but the wise man built his house upon the rocks. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. And when the rain comes down, it washes the sand away and that house collapses. And that is a parable, a metaphor for building your hopes on anything other than God. It's the fate of those who don't listen to and act on God's word, but particularly people who put their faith in anything, their hope, in anything else. The final line is interesting. Smile thou and I shall sing, but shall not question much. It does refer back to the end of the first half where she says, I have not often smiled since then, nor questioned since. So a good Christian should not question the ways of God. Yeah, God works in mysterious ways. You just have to accept he knows what he's doing. It's a reversal of the gloomy reaction to heartbreak in stanza 3, where she says, I have not often smiled since then, nor questioned since. At that point, there was no point because she has no agency. She's offered her heart, he's rejected it, that's it. She can't go back again. It could be a triumph now. I don't need to question God. This is going to be fine because I can trust God like I can't trust a human man. But religious doubts do feature in other poems. The line could be more tentative. I won't question much. There may be some questions. So some of our Victorian context to bear in mind. The female speaker of this poem has broken the codes of courtship and gender expectations by speaking first and admitting that she's in love with a man. And she knows this. She says so. A woman's words are weak. You should speak, not I. Oh, look at that nice internal rhyme as well with weak and speak. But this once, hear me speak. So that once, yeah, a woman really rarely speaks, but just says, I'm just going to try it once. So reminds us of the submissive role expected of women generally, and specifically their silence. They're not supposed to speak and put themselves forward. There may be some resentment coming out here from Rossetti of these sorts of restrictions on women. That's a thing that you have to decide for yourself and see how much of the poem you think can justify that reading. And then when she smiles at him, even as he breaks her heart, it's very sad, it's a very painful moment in the poem, and it shows how women were expected to repress negative emotions in the poem, and also keep things secret, keep lost their feelings secret. As you set it down, it broke, but I did not wince. So she can't show that feeling. I smiled at the speech you spoke. The male character seems blissfully unaware, you could see, or ignorant on purpose, of the pain he causes her. You could be seen as patronising. Once again, that's see how you read it. He certainly has power over her. This word about it describes the day as heedless, and it's interesting to consider who was most heedless that day. One heedless day, she describes it as. She didn't think of the consequences for herself, so she was heedless, but maybe he was also heedless. He didn't take her love or the pain he would cause her seriously. And she also describes herself as contemned of a man, which, as you might guess, means treated with contempt. Doesn't mean condemned, contemned. So, our themes going on here, how divine love is more long-lasting and worthwhile than human love, how painful unrequited love is, and also the necessary suffering of a human life. Yeah, it's not all rose petals and soft pillows. You know, you've got to go through this refiner's fire before you get accepted by God. You've got to be willing to do that. Yay! There we go.